Hello. Just getting situated. I have my microphone on this little thing, which I am super excited about because Dolly and I are going to do a heart-to-heart together, and that'll be my first time recording like in the same physical space. I take that back. That's not true. Technically, I have done that one other time. Anyways, this will be my second time doing that. Hopefully, my first successful time of doing it. It didn't work out the other time. But yeah, so we're going to do that. And I only have one microphone. So she came up with this so that we can like hook it on there and then sit it between us and we can share. So that's lovely. So we got that coming in soon. Oh my goodness. I don't know how to fix that. Where to start this day? How has your week been? How you doing out there in YouTube land? I'm like tired, I think is the best way to describe it. I don't feel like down or sad or like anything like that necessarily, but very, very low energy I've had this whole last week. And I talked a little bit last Friday that I went to the grocery summit at the beginning of last week. And I'm like, okay, good to know that I want to like carve out a solid 2 weeks when I come back from those to recover and recuperate. So yeah, I'm still working on that, but I am super just kind of like basking in gratitude this week for lots of different things. And again, that's kind of where I'm like, okay, where do I start with this? Nothing like super major, just getting to witness connections in my life this week that weren't there 6 months ago or like even 2 weeks ago, like watching that there are connections forming in my world that are new and that feel good. And I got to witness so much connection this week, and I was a part of all of it. And it just, like it really makes me grateful that this is my life. Like this week, I'm tired because it's been a lot of connecting, but it's been so cup filling, heart filling. Yeah. So on Tuesday was the Sacred Circle for the Patreon group. If you're in the Patreon group, the recording is up in there. You can check that out anytime, as well as any of the recordings from the past ones. The next one, the July Sacred Circle, is July 26th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Irene, I didn't know you live in Greece. Wow. Thanks for tuning in. Hello, how you doing? Yeah, so July 26th, we'll come back together. So those are once a month. The fourth Tuesday of every month is when the Sacred Circle is. We had that this past Tuesday, and it was such a cup-filling experience of exchanging energy that felt so good, like-hearted souls coming together to have conversations that move the entire group, even the people not engaged in the conversation. Like you see everybody like nodding along or taking their own notes of like realizations, just even from listening to other people share their stories. And it, like, this is where okay, so this is a perfect segue because I do, lately I've had a really good time like picking out a comment that I got, and like especially one that moves energy in me, and sharing it and answering it kind of like as an intro to this, just to add a different dimension to it, to the conversation. But I feel like this really fits with what we're going to talk about when we get into the deep dive part of Mercury in Cancer, Mars in Taurus. Um, we're on a roll of energy at this point that is really cool to stand back and watch. Like when I pulled the cards for last Friday's live stream, I pulled 3 cards, and then I pulled 3 more cards for the Monday video that I recorded the next day, and 2 of the 3 cards were the same. It was like the same message wanted to come through. And then Wednesday, so this is a bit of a, a story, is like, so the episode that got released is number 50, The Power of Choice. And it was my 50th episode. I was aware as I was recording it that it was my 50th episode. I was super jazzed. I couldn't believe it. How have I done 50 of these? That's amazing. And so it was really, really powerful just in its own message, like the lead up to it. But then in about 40 minutes into it, I go into a tarot reading where once again, one of the cards that has repeated last Friday and then again on Monday, it was repeated again in the tarot reading from the episode 50 that got released on YouTube on Wednesday, but I recorded it August of 2021, and I converted it into an episode and uploaded it onto YouTube as unlisted, as like scheduled for a future release, like 6 months ago. And every time it was this episode's turn to get released, something would happen where like either I would record a new episode and I would want that to go out as timely for like right now energy. And so I would just like bump it again to the end of the line. And now it's like going to get released in 6 weeks. And now 6 weeks comes along and it's like, I have another new episode. So now it's like bumped to the end of the line again. So it's been getting bumped to the end of the line for 6 months. And now it released last Wednesday. And so I'm listening like, what on earth is so special about this message that like it carved out its own path onto the channel? Like it picked its own timing, basically. So I'm like, why? What is it? And then I heard the tarot reading where, yeah, that card is in that as well. So like here we are on like this thread of energy of oh my gosh. And again, this is like, where do you even start with like how powerful these 2 personal planets, like, so Mercury is going into Cancer right behind the Cancer new moon that we just had. So like the sun is still, the sun is still moving through Cancer. The moon has since moved on. And now here comes Mercury. And Mercury's going to go behind the sun and the moon and that seed that got planted. And here comes Mercury to like take the seed and do what Mercury does, where it breaks it down into the parts and pieces. And morning, Bola. So yeah, Mercury's going to like kind of take that seed and run with it a little bit in that Cancer space. And Mars is sextile to Cancer. It's a supportive, harmonious minor aspect in the chart or whatever. And the aspects are just representing that conversation that the planets are having. So basically on July 5th, as Mars enters Taurus and Mercury enters Cancer, and they're both at 0 degrees, they'll have that perfect sextile on July 5th. So coming here very soon. And this energy, like, it is taking a lot that has already, like, basically work that you've already invested, healing that you've already done, readiness that you've already pre-paved, and it is grounding it powerfully into the physical. One of the cards that I drew for today is the Ace of Pentacles. And this is very much new beginnings, but also like deeply rooted new beginnings, like very fertile soil, very rich possibilities for taking this and running with it clear through to fruition. And part of like the more practical side of what's unfolding this week is like, what do you want your life to be? What do you like day to day experience wise, not necessarily like when you're all said and done at the end, like what do you want it to add up into, but like day to day, what is the experience that would feel nice to you? And this was really interesting. On Wednesday, I got to go to, I never did read that comment. I might come back to it. We'll see if it pops its head back up. But on Wednesday, I got to go meet with a grocery store owner who is in the process of opening their grocery store. They're kind of still in very early stages. And was talking with her, just learning more, like even kind of pre-business plan stage. So was just kind of learning more about what has she already thought through in terms of the operations of the business and products and services, staffing, on and on and on. And so I was asking her some questions around the staffing, and she basically told me that she expects that she will work full time. And my immediate question was, how do you define full time? And that one definitely stumped her, but I'm gonna put it to you too, is like, one, do you want to work full time? And two, how do you even define that? Um, it's definitely more food for thought than you might expect, because like defining that for yourself and building a pace that is nice for you means that your endeavor is sustainable. So it's not it's not like a soft approach. Like, we're not trying to like be all soft and gentle with ourselves because we can't handle hard things. If any, being soft and gentle with ourselves is how we do hard things. It's how we have the energy that we need to show up and do the work that matters so much to us. Um, like I started a book this week too, which like folds right in here, called Do Hard Things by, I think his name is Steve Magnus, maybe. Let me look. Yep, Steve Magnus, Do Hard Things. I think this is like his third book. But that's essentially what he's talking about. Is, I think the subtitle is like The Surprising Science of Toughness. And it's not what you think. It's not powering through. It's not play through the pain and like, if it doesn't kill you, it makes it stronger. Like, no. He's like, at a certain point, like if your body is telling you to stop, you have to stop. You have to cooperate with like this vehicle that you're in. Like if you've run out of oil and your engine explodes, your car doesn't go anymore. And pushing through it, it's like, why? Why is that even for? Good morning. Hello. Welcome, Shay. Welcome, Billy. Gosh, I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm so pumped for this energy. So excited to get to, again, continue this thread of conversation that is centered around like basically the practical reason of like, why do we take care of ourselves in the first place? Why do we invest in our own gas tank? Why do we figure out how our energy works so that we can build something of a life that works for us and our unique needs? Why do we do that? And for me, I mean, I can't answer that question for anybody else, but for me, it really does come down to like, I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of desire in my heart, in my soul, to bring a greater level of love to this planet. That is very core as far as my intention for this lifetime, is to do my part of creating more love on this planet, which is to say, do my part in transmuting the suffering that comes through me and trying to teach other people how to productively work with and hopefully transmute their own suffering, so that, again, we are all having access to a greater level of love on this planet. So this is my core intention for my life. And as you can imagine, I take it very seriously as, as you can, when your ultimate top priority is to have the best maintained vehicle that's going to run for hundreds of thousands of miles for years and years and years. Like, I have something in the back of my mind, and most people I think laugh me off when I say this, but like I do mean it, is like, I expect, like, there's something about me that just feels like I'm living till I'm like 135, and even then it is like it's like a conscious transition of like, I think I'm done here. I think I'm done with my work in this span of time and I'm ready to move on to something else. But that's at 135 years old. So again, I'm not trying to find like, how am I going to position myself so that, I can work my ass off and kill myself for, however much money I can trade that for until I'm 65 and then I want to retire? Like, I don't want to retire. I don't even entertain that idea. I don't think it makes sense, because if you were living a life that fed your soul, you would never want to retire from that. And if you're living a life where you're really not super satisfied with the exchange that you're making, I can see why you would need like a light at the end of the tunnel related to continuing to show up to that thing. Um, but yeah, I decided like back at the software company, like I just can't spend my time doing something that doesn't feed my soul, that doesn't like let my heart and soul participate. They want to participate. They are very aware that like, even though I'm going to live to be 135, like that's still a finite amount of time on this planet. Like I'm sitting here with this clock in my head that's like, you only have 102 more years. Like, there's a very real part of me that's like, make it count. And if it's any less than that, then even more reason to like make it count. Like, do the most important thing to you. Put that at the top of the list, and right above it is how well you maintain your vehicle. Because again, if the vehicle craps out, you can't do anything, let alone what's most important to you. So yeah, it's like I take self-care like very seriously. I don't know if you guys have picked that up. Maybe you have. But it seems like, especially with all this Cancer energy lit up in the sky right now, this conversation is super timely with what we're being shown in our own energetics, and being able to recognize like what is the current state of your energy and have that information in real time to be able to use to guide yourself in making decisions that honor what is really true for your heart and soul, which is essentially Cancer. It's like your raw emotional truth. So when we're talking about Cancer energy, we're talking about like the real and raw state of your emotions. And in the sacred circle, that was an amazing conversation that is continuing to unfold in my consciousness. So thank you for everyone who co-created that with me. But we were also talking about self-care and emotion management, and got around to mentioning um, Brene Brown's work in general, but especially her first TED Talk called The Power of Vulnerability, where the basic idea, it really is basic. It's like this notion that you cannot selectively numb emotions. And that makes a lot of sense to me with how I understand Cancer as like the head of a well, like the top of a well. And it's like through this well, through this pipe comes our emotions. And it's like, you can't cover half the well and like only get these kinds of emotions. It's like all intermixed and it's one flow of energy and there's just one place for it. So either you're like blocking off the entire pipeline of emotion, or you're allowing the entire pipeline of emotion. And allowing the entire pipeline of emotion is intense. It's like an intense experience in your body. And so there's a very visceral reason why we as human beings can keep a lid on our emotions. We can some in some cases energetically, like you can be even basically detached from the emotional experience that you're having. Um, it really just depends like on your unique energy, like how vividly your emotions are impacting your moment to moment experience. Um, for me, it's always been front and center. Like, I have no poker face. Like, if I'm miserable, I look miserable. I sound miserable. I feel miserable to the other people who have to deal with me. Like, I have no poker face. Like, either I'm happy and you know it, or I'm miserable and you know that too. So my depression was like not a secret to anybody that I ever came into contact with. So it just like really like, honestly, like, made it nearly impossible for me to connect with, like, anybody just because I was looking at myself like, who would want to connect with me, you know? Like, I feel so miserable, I'm so depressed, like, who would want to be around this? And that obviously is a self-fulfilling prophecy to where it does lead you in that direction where you think that nobody wants to be with me when I'm down, and it's like, really, I again, this is just my own personal 2 cents, it's like, I realized I didn't wanna be with me, like, that was just me beating up on me. I heard this other thing the other day that's like, it's never really about whether or not, like, somebody else is abusing us. Like, when somebody else is abusing us and this is a big and we, like, continue to tolerate it, like, it's not so much that we're in abusive relationship with the other person, we're in an abusive relationship with ourself. And it's that, like, believing that this is the best it's ever gonna be, basically, is a very, like, I think, common reason to be in that situation. Like, I was listening to Dr. K's video this morning of gosh, what did it say? It's like, "Nobody's ever gonna love me or nobody's ever gonna understand me," or something like that, and I was like, God, that brought back memories of I definitely felt that way and put up with shit in relationships because I thought, like, "Well, at least I have someone." It's better than being alone, and at a certain point, like, again, that's, like, the priority of, like, external harmony versus internal harmony, and like, at the end of the day, like, if there are things in our external world that are messing up our ability to find our inner security, our inner peace, it's just a matter of priority, what you're willing to put up with and what you're not. And that's a big piece that I want to incorporate into my program that we're going to go through for the soul revelation and spiritual business is like understand that when you interact with someone, even if you're extroverted, like, it's not maybe for an extrovert, it's less that it costs you energy. Definitely if you're introverted, you are paying energy for that exchange. So there's always, like, the time you're in it plus the recovery period. And again, this kind of fits into, like, pricing your services, like, and even deciding what kind of services do you wanna offer. This is why I don't offer 90-minute sessions anymore because the amount of energy I spend and then the recovery period, it's, like, intense. It's like a day and a half, 2 days to recover from expending those 90 minutes of energy. So, like, the cost of the recovery, the cost of, like, if you go over to somebody's house where this isn't gonna be good, like, I'm gonna go see this person, and I know every time I do, they pick at me or they insult me or whatever, but, I have autonomy in this situation, this hypothetical picture, and I'm choosing to go there, and it's like, "Why?" Why? And, it kind of points you back to priorities. It's like, if you're continuing to go, like, in an ipso facto backwards engineering kind of way, it's like, does it mean that the higher priority is the harmony with the other person, AKA, like, not upsetting them, the walking on eggshells kind of thing, versus, like, if you choose not to go and you choose to disappoint someone else, does that mean that the priority now is higher that, like, I really can't afford to go fight with them right now because I know tonight I'm meeting with so and so and I really want my energy to be in a good place, and I know every time I go there, it's like a whole day of, like, trying to get my head back in order, and I don't wanna take that energy over here to my friend that I love so much, and, like really being mindful of, like, what is the energy cost, what is the energy recovery period of what you're choosing for your life experience. And these two energies, especially, again, very powerful because Taurus is a fixed earth energy and Cancer is a cardinal water energy. And when you put them both together, they both have shared themes of security and stability and being very very slow to anger, very like peaceful energies, really, unless you push them into a corner or you insult somebody that they love. And then they will beat your ass. They are like, I heard this thing when they were talking about Mars, but they were talking about motherhood in general. It's like some of the most dangerous animals to encounter in the wild are the ones who have their young with them. Because if you get even near here, like I will tear you apart like mama bear kind of thing. But normally, the bear is not like hunting you down and like trying to aggressively like be in your face. It's just protecting what's stable and what's secure and what's important and valuable. And so yeah, like this energy feels like, especially the Mars through Taurus, because that's a bit longer of a transit. Like that one goes from July 5th to August 20th. It's about 45 days thereabouts. And then Mercury in Cancer is a shorter one. It's only July 5th through July 19th. So that's only a 2-week transit. So a little bit different in length of time. Like Mercury will be on into Leo and Mars will still be in Taurus, at which time I think they do come into a square. Taurus and Leo are square. I'd have to double check if they ever make it close enough to get to the square point. But so like they're having kind of an ongoing conversation, right? Like July 5th, when they both enter their new signs, they're in that supportive, harmonious sextile of like, let's begin this new adventure together kind of thing, like in harmony. The other piece, well, I mentioned already the Cancer new moon that just happened on June 28th. We also have coming up, I think it's on the 12th or the 13th. I think the 13th, the Capricorn full moon. Like I've talked about before, where the new moon and the full moon, like in the sun's trip through the zodiac sign. So like it's now in Cancer. So the new moon's going to be in Cancer and the full moon will be in the opposite sign of Capricorn. And those work together. It's like this Cancer new moon that happened just a few days ago. I guess it was Tuesday, the day of the sacred circle. Um, that that planted a seed that, like, the new moon is going to plant the seed that comes to fruition on not the following full moon, like 2 weeks later, the Capricorn full moon. The Cancer new moon is yielding a seed that'll come to fruition at the Cancer full moon. So like in January of 2023 will be the Cancer full moon, I do believe, because the one earlier this year was January 17th. We had a Cancer full moon. So it's like more like a 6-month cycle of manifesting whatever upgrade the Cancer new moon is ushering in. It takes a good long while, a good long chunk of time to like actually integrate that into not just your mind, but into your body, where you can feel your own security, you can feel your own inner peace. That's what Mars and Taurus is really, you know, I always love getting into the placements of the planets, like when they say that they're in detriment. Like, for example, Mars in Taurus is said to be in detriment. And I can't help myself but put like a positive spin on everything. So, and this is Dolly's placement. She's got Mars in Taurus. So I feel like I get to observe the good things and the bad things and like up close. So um yeah, Mars and Taurus being in detriment it does make sense when you look at like Mars ruling Aries and Scorpio, and especially Aries, like basically being associated with conflict. And then Taurus and Libra are the signs where Mars is in detriment because they're opposite Scorpio and Aries. And so in Taurus and Libra, it's like, Mars is in detriment, I think just means 100%, like all it means is that it does not look anything like when Mars is in Aries. Like it's just not the same. It's exactly opposite. It's like the polar antonym of what it would mean if Mars was in Aries. And the reason I say that is because it's not bad. It's definitely not bad to have Mars in Taurus. Or Mars in Libra for that matter. Like it's a very peaceful energy. Like you think about Taurus being ruled by the bull. Bulls have been kind of like, what is that? What's that word that I'm thinking of? Not corrupted, but like pulled into like the culture of bullfighting. And so like there's a lot of aggression associated with bulls. And it like dairy bulls are more aggressive than like, pasture bulls. Anyways, like there's varying levels of degree of aggression inside bulls. But mostly cows are very, very placid. They stand there like all day and chew their grass and like lay around and they're happy, like they're just hanging out. Unless you mess with one of their calves, and then you will see a mama chase you up and over the fence like in no time. And so again, it's like, don't mess with me and I'll just be giving hugs all day long. That's Mars and Taurus. Like I was asking Dolly earlier, because like she works out a lot. So like she's got like freaking muscles or whatever. But again, she's got like the most gentle hands I've ever felt. Like the way she touches things, like it's just like there's nothing but gentility coming through her paws. I tell her all the time she has such gentle paws. And the other night, this was maybe like within the last month or two, probably, she had a dream where some guy was like, it wasn't anybody she knew or anything like that, and like nothing really had triggered the dream, but like in the dream some guy was getting in her face, and that like I was involved as far as like she was stepping in as far as like a protective type energy in between like me and this other person. And the guy is getting in her face, and he's like, let's take this outside, and she's like, let's go. And then she woke up. And so she didn't fight the guy in the dream, but she was going to. And like she woke up remembering that feeling of like she was not backing down. She's like, I'll kick your freaking ass. Like, no, like yes, let's take it outside. Like, let's go. I'm doing this. And she was like totally gonna fight the guy in the dream. And I'm like, I've never had a dream like that. But like again, so reassuring and reaffirming that like do not mistake a peaceful nature for weak. That like you think, oh, this person looks like they're just like, oh, like hanging out, no big deal, all chill. It's like, yeah, I mean, still give them their space. Like you don't want to be like, oh, it's chill, I'll just like go invade its space, I'll go like threaten its loved ones. Like, oh boy, like, yeah, you bite off more than you can chew, because that Taurus energy, when it goes pow after that 30 million mile long fuse burns out, like it can do some damage. They were talking about like Mars in detriment fighters, like UFC fighters. This was on the Astrology podcast, like the Mars deep dive episode. We're missing Maddie today. She's at jury duty, so no links in the description. She'll put them in the description later, but not on the spot like we're normally used to. Got to do that civic duty. And now what was I even talking about? Oh, they were talking about Mars on the Astrology podcast, and Mars in Taurus fighters are some of the most destructive. Like they have incredible stamina and can be on the defensive for multiple rounds basically until the other person wears themselves out, and then just like knocks them down and they're done. And so they had some examples of some different names. I don't really follow the UFC, but I definitely get the concept, and I could see that with Dolly too. Like she like Mars represents like our anger, our fire, our passion, our whatever. And like I'm a Mars in Pisces and she's a Mars in Taurus. So like we're both very like peaceful creatures by nature. And so we really don't fight like ever. It's mostly like she's walked out on me a couple times. She's like, take all that and walk right out the front door. Don't even tell me what's going on. So I've seen that side of it a couple times, but like neither of us really take the approach of like battling it out with the other person. Like she said, like, I would rather just give people hugs. Like, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I just want people to feel good and be happy. And she actually got into a thing with somebody here very, very recently. And that it had been like several days since she had talked to the person and or had responded or like whatever. And the person was like apologizing. And she finally did see them. And the first thing, she walks right up and she says, give me a hug. Give me a hug. That's how we're starting this conflict resolution. Come here. I love you. That's her. That's like her approach to conflict resolution, is to first hug them. So they know that like at least you love them. And then from there, you can sort out anything that you want. So peace first. And this is where again, like I don't fully understand like the negative connotations of like the Mars being debilitated or whatever, because they were also talking about like, Mars and the water signs can be tricky because you end up with like less physical energy because you're putting so much of your energy into your emotions, and or that's where that energy is like centered or whatever. And I'm like, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing that you have low physical energy. It only is a bad thing if you're pushing yourself to do something anyway when you don't have the physical energy. Like, if you don't have physical energy and then you let yourself rest, and that leads to a nap where you have a dream that gives you a revelation, like, I think that's Mars and Pisces or Mars and Cancer kind of at its best, is like when you rest really well, and the effect that you get out of the rest itself, that's not wrong. That's not like in detriment. To be peaceful to other creatures instead of want to charge into war at them, I don't think that's a bad thing. Right? So like, take this as far as a grain of salt with all the detriments, with all the planets in fall, or they're debilitated or they're weak in this sign or whatever. It's like, I don't believe that there is such a thing as like a weak place for Mars. I think it's all just a matter of like, how does that get channeled? And again, I'm like, don't mistake somebody's peacefulness for weakness, because that's not an assumption that the physical world lets you make. It's possible to be strong and peaceful. Dolly, when she proved this. Right, Gruber? Yeah. So let's see. Ooh, yes. So Mercury and Mars, they literally represent the mind, Mercury, and the body, Mars. And this was another piece of that conversation with the grocery store owner, was telling me that they were trying to set something up. Like, they had this idea, they wanted to make this online store and do it this way, and like had kind of a decent enough vision, enough to build it for sure. And right about that time, they started having back spasms for like 2 months, just like so much pain. And that made depression worse, and like just beating up on yourself because you're not doing the things and you have to rest so much. And like, sounded like, yeah, sounded like a lot. And I was like, again, I this is just from an outsider's perspective, but as far as like the mind body connection, it sounds like you tried to do that thing and your body said no. Your body said, we're not doing that. Like, your body opted to be in pain on the couch for 2 months instead of do what your mind wanted to do. So like I find very interesting, because I do that to myself a lot, not a lot anymore, but before, where it would almost be something of like a blessing for me to get sick, because it meant that I could stop and I could like stay home for a while and not have to see people and like all of that. And it's like, hmm. We do our best from where we are at any given time. And at that time, that was the best that I could do. That was the best I could take care of myself, was to enjoy when I would get sick so that I could like take a few days off. And now I've progressed or evolved, or however you want to say that, to prioritizing my energy in a way where I'll proactively take time off over almost nothing. I'll put myself on like energetic bed rest. And that's why I say, like, this last week I've been really tired, and what that means is I have been like in my bed most of the week. I've gotten up to do a couple things here and there, but mostly I've been laying down. I've taken long naps every day. I've been sleeping like 12 hours a night. Like, it has taken me a lot to recharge my body. And I think about, like all the times in the past where I would push through that tiredness to continue to do what my mind wanted done, and how after the tiredness comes full on burnout eventually. Your body shuts down, the energy just isn't there. And so again, for me, I've gone through that burnout cycle enough times that oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Billy says, same here. Finally allowed myself to rest whenever my body just wants it, not more guilt over it. It feels so good. Yeah, like, how often does your brain feel cloudy or you just like have just a general sense of like just a little bit of lethargy? And, you know, I see Dolly do it sometimes. I know I've done it before. It's like, and you're kind of like telling yourself, like, all right, just get a cup of coffee. Like, you can do it. You can, and like try to like psych yourself back up to keep going. And again, it's like, why? Why do you do that? And it is like the guilt. It's the guilt over the slowing down. It's the guilt over allowing yourself to rest. It's the guilt over like, yeah, I mean, okay, so that's something that I can struggle with even in my spiritual business because like I was describing my core intention of adding more love to the planet by transmuting suffering wherever I can. Sometimes in my extended rest periods, like this week, for example, I didn't have a Tuesday video and I didn't do a chapter of the North Node series for my Thursday video. I skipped both of those because I was like, dude, I'm tapped out. Like I don't have the energy for that this week. And I had some not necessarily like anxiety. It definitely wasn't anything to that degree, but some thoughts for sure, a few different times that led me to have to journal about it. But some thoughts that were like, you know, people are watching those. Like, aren't you gonna like get that out? Like, doesn't the world like deserve that? Like, you have it already. Like, why don't you just do it and get it out there? And my body's like, I just really don't feel like it. And I'm not sick. I don't feel bad. I am awake, but I really don't feel like it. I think I'm too tired for that. And letting myself off that hook, it's like learning how to do that isn't a one and done kind of thing. Like it's like a tool then that you possess of like how to get yourself off hooks like that, you know? Cuz every single time that it's like that thought gives you a sense of like guilt or something and it's like every single time unraveling it back around to that core basic truth of at the very top of my list, just over my core purpose is how well I maintain my vehicle. If I'm not doing this first, this one is in jeopardy. It doesn't have, like, if you want to put a foundation under it, it doesn't have a sturdy foundation to exist on top of. So, prioritizing ourselves and the care that we do for ourselves on purpose to address our needs is basically the theme of this Mars and Taurus, Mercury and Cancer. It's like we can cultivate that for ourselves simply by paying attention to ourselves. Like, when are you tired? When do you need a snack? When do you need to go to bed? It's bedtime. We're done with this day. When do you need to turn the alarm off and sleep for 2 more hours? When, like, that's a big one that goes back to emotion management. Like, one of the keys, one of the, like, not even a pillar, like, it's more like one level of the whole foundation of doing good emotion management is like, how much sleep do you get? Because, hustle culture would have you think you can sleep when you're dead. You'll be fine. Like, just ignore the sleep and use that time that you would normally be sleeping to work instead. And that by doing that, then you'll get ahead faster and you'll be more successful and blah, blah, blah. I personally think that's a pile of bullshit because if you are low on sleep, again, like it's like you have a hole in your gas tank. And it's like no matter what you put in there, it just like leaks back out. And like my brother, he's getting a new car because his car leaks oil. He like has to pour it in there all the time because he has such a bad leak that isn't fixed. And it's like you can do it that way. You can just pour more oil, put more and more energy and invest more and more time into putting oil in your car, or you can like patch the leak or replace that part and then it doesn't leak and then you don't have to put as much oil, still sometimes of course, but not 3 times as much. Like, if it's not leaking out, then you don't need as much, and again, you're just more stable. You have a better foundation that then whatever you're doing on that foundation, whatever relationships, whatever work, whatever life you're trying to live, it's like now you have a sturdy foundation. Um, I have this image in my mind that I wanna use for the program that's like 2 balloons side by side, and one of them is just little, and it's like just a little balloon, and the other one is like so big you can like see through it, and you can tell it's like stretched to the max. And basically the question is like, are you the little balloon or are you the big balloon? Because personally for me, I lived the first, 20, 30 years of my life as the big balloon where I was full all the time, like on the edge of popping all the time. And then it would be some random straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing that would set me off. And then I would vent or explode or whatever. And that's how some air would finally get to come out of the balloon and shrink it back down. But then it's only like half full. And then it's like it would just pile back up, pile back up, pile back up, pile back up. And eventually it explodes. And okay, now it's only half full. But that was the range that I lived in before. And now I feel like I'm a little bit closer to the little balloon where like I can afford to pile up a little bit because the most I'm going to get to is like a half full balloon before it's tomorrow morning and I'm going to journal or I'm going to go for a walk or I'm going to, do whatever I need to do, take a nap, take a shower, whatever I can do to ground myself and to process whatever the emotions were that came up. It's like that's how I on purpose, like let the air back out of the balloon. Now it's just little again. And now again tomorrow, I can afford to take on just a little bit and still be okay. I'm not in any risk of popping my balloon. Like I'm super steady. And it's like moving through the world like that. Yeah. Like, and what I wonder if people, you know, we all only ever have our own experience. And so if you haven't ever lived like a really strong degree of security, like, I think it can be easy to think that that is equated with, like, having a lot of money or resources or whatever, and I'm not saying they're not tied together. I absolutely believe that a certain amount of money can produce a certain level of security, but when we're talking, like, the kind of security that soothes social anxiety, the kind of security that lets you walk into a job interview and get yourself hired, the kind of security that lets you go on a date and build a relationship with a person that you're interested in. Like that kind of security of like actually being, loving yourself and liking yourself and being confident in yourself, money can't buy that. Like no amount of money in the whole world can soothe social anxiety. Like it may look like on the surface that it does, but I promise, like these kinds of fixes, this kind of security, it is not a financial equation at all. And I personally did not know that, and that's why I spent a good big chunk of my 20s chasing money because I did think that. I thought that a lot of my confidence issues would be solved with having a certain level of financial security. And I'm grateful I did that. It definitely benefited me a great deal. I paid dearly for that money. Um, but now I feel like I'm investing it in a way that is like launching the whole rest of my life. So like I'm making the best out of what I did, but I definitely was like climbing to the top of a mountain that did not have what I really wanted when I got up there. Like when you have a certain level of money as your physical security, at a certain point, it like you don't feel any different. It doesn't like, okay, now there's five extra $1,000 in your savings account, and like you feel the same. Like if it was already enough and now it's just more than enough, it's like that doesn't do anything. And that's where I am now pivoted into like, I want work that pays me in something other than money. I want work that feeds my soul. I want work that that's a nug. Yes, that's a nuggie. yeah, I want work that feels good and provides opportunity for deep, meaningful connection. And that's where I go back to like, I am so freaking grateful for this whole week of like showing me all of these different people that are in my life that weren't there 6 months ago. And like the Patreon community or the getting to meet that other grocery owner or like going to the summit last week. Like, so many people in this world doing such good work on themselves in their communities. There are so many, so many cool people in this world. And I have gotten to interact with so many of them in these last couple weeks. And yeah, it's like that feels cup filling. That feels like, when we go back to the very beginning of like, what do you need? What are your needs? Cancer is very concerned with, of course, your physical needs. Are you hungry? Can I feed you? That's very cancerian or motherly. But it's also like your emotional energy. And, like when your kid gets off the school bus and you're like, oh, did you have a bad day? Like you can just tell that their energy is heavy, they look sad, whatever it is, like what are your needs? And Cancer represents like both our, kind of, well, I guess they say the moon represents our experience of our mother. But Cancer represents the mother, the divine mother, and can be how we were mothered in our childhood and also how we develop our own nurturing instincts. So our own ability to nurture ourselves and by extension, our ability to nurture other people as well. Um, Gosh, I have been like just straight up rambling for 52 minutes. And I feel like, actually, I did just see one thing. So this goes back to Mars and being in detriment in Taurus. Um, Allow me to just do a massive Gemini leap on over to a completely, different dot. Um, but the note I have here says the Mars outlet matters. So Mars like is our somatic experience. And I had to look up what does somatic mean? And it's the experience of the soma. You love it when that happens, right? You're like, oh, great, thanks. Okay, so what is the soma? What does that mean? It's the body. It's like the body separate from the spirit, separate from the mind, separate from the psyche or the subconscious, like just the physical body part itself. The somatic experience is like the bodily sensations that we ever have. And Mars represents that experience. And so basically, how we can understand Mars is that it is filling us with urges and desires no matter what sign it's in, no matter what aspects it's making, no matter what. Like Mars is generating a certain amount and a certain type of energy inside of us every single day. And the Mars outlet is like, how are you channeling that energy in your life so that it isn't backed up in your system? Because again, like when you do let that energy just sit there, that's where your balloon is like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it pops. And that's where Mars and Taurus, like being so peaceful, being so loving and not interested in a conflict unless that's the only possible solution. Um, it can be a challenge of like making sure that you are physically releasing all of that energy that is coming through you, um, because there can be such a detachment from like any kind of aggressive behavior. So, like for example, like I said, Dolly has Mars and Taurus, and she'll go out to the lake sometimes, and like usually she's got like a lot in her energy field or whatever. Like when she knows that she's got a bunch in there, and to like let the air out of her balloon, she'll go walk at the lake for like 7 hours. Like it takes a while to exercise or like go on a bike ride for like 3 hours. Like there's a lot of physical energy, like Mars in Taurus, Taurus being so associated with our body and our five senses. I think there is like a really powerful amount of energy and stamina. It may not look aggressive, but that doesn't mean it's any less powerful. And for each of us, while we have this transit, this July 5th through August 20th, it's like each and every one of us are going to have what I would think of as like maybe not like noticeably higher energy, but probably like a greater intensity in our somatic experience, like somebody turning the volume knob up on our ability to hear what our body is saying to us, like when it's tired, when it's angry, when it's hungry, when it's which anger and hunger are like right there together, right? Like feed yourself. Are you still mad? No? Okay, good. Sometimes, not always. But yeah, that Mars outlet, making sure that you are physically moving that energy. Mars and Taurus is a very earthy placement. So physical energy being elevated and needing even more of an outlet. Um, I also think though that like I've talked about a lot lately with like these transits as we study them, like Mars and Taurus, for example, yes, we are all going to have this like Mars and Taurus energy in the stew that we're all sitting in right now. But one, we all have different placements in Taurus. Taurus is in a different house for everybody. And so, like, Mars moving through Taurus is going to stimulate each of us differently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And also back to where is your natal Mars? Because that may give you some clues as far as like now you have even more energy to use your natal Mars to take action in a way that feels good to you. Um, I do think that like having Mercury and Mars like sextile at July 5th, like as they both enter these new signs, I see that as like having your divine masculine and your body and your urges and your desires, your passion, your soul, your raw spark, your the fight that's worth fighting, like Mars, to have wow, that was a big growl in my stomach slash tummy. But to have all of that like raw desire hooked up with Mercury, your mental, your intellectual, your ability to conceptualize, but again, like in Cancer, so again, tied back into your emotions, tied back into what helps you to achieve inner emotional security, what is worth protecting, what is the home space that is worth protecting, meaning like where are your loved ones and what's in there and all of that. Um, yeah, like all of that kind of rising to the surface and being a little bit more assertive about our own security, a little bit more in touch, both body and mind, with what are our needs and how can I take really good care of myself. Like it's like they're hooking up, linking up to like bring that mind body connection to the surface. It's like if you happen to notice, I had a friend a long time ago, this was years ago. I noticed after like 6 months of being friends with this person, every time I went home from hanging out with this person, I had a headache. Every single time I would go home. And eventually I realized that, and then I like started paying closer attention while I was with the friend, and I felt myself tensing. And it was a mixture of different things, mostly my own issues being reflected to me, mostly that I don't agree with what she's saying. And I'm walking on eggshells to keep the peace instead of asserting what I believe and even just letting myself say it out loud. I was holding that energy in, that disagreement inside instead of vocalizing it to her. And I would fill that balloon while I was with her with like all this energy that's being inspired and I wasn't letting it flow. And that balloon like would be so full, I would have a headache every time I would go home from her house. So eventually I realized like either speak up or you need to not be friends with her. And of course, being the Pisces Mars passive shit that I am, I opted to just not be friends with her anymore. Um, but now I do see that. I do see where there's a time for passivity and there's a time to let your passion come through. And that if you're able to like get in alignment with your true flow, where like, you know, you're not questioning the desires that come through, the urges that come through. Raw, like Mars is very raw. It's somatic. It's like a bodily sensation. It doesn't have a package of logic. It's not giving you a book report on the reasons why you should believe it. It's not trying to prove anything to you. It's telling you this is right now. And like, okay, can I let that energy come through? And I've learned that if I feel one of those and then I let myself speak and get passionate and whatever, like chances are somebody else is going to take something away from what I said, like good, bad, or ugly, like in that moment. It's what was meant to go down versus like just constantly being like, oh no, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. It's like, I think, again, I don't want to, like Dolly said, like, I just want to give you a hug. Not really. Like, I have that shirt that says free hugs. Just kidding. Don't touch me. But it's like, I really do just want to keep the peace with people. But at a certain point, my Mars in Pisces, my Mars in the 12th house, it's like at a certain point, I can get very passionate and feel like fighting on behalf of the collective consciousness. Like, what is good and what is in the best interest for humanity? Like, what is in the best interest for the interconnectedness of all things? And the planet belongs in there, animals belong in there, of course humans belong in there too, but like the balance of all life, like what is in that best interest? And so I have found these last couple years that, yeah, when I can tap into how much I care about that, I can get very passionate very quickly, and then I can see, oh, I have that side of me. It's just like not, I mean, it's in Pisces that where like the ego is kind of dissolved. Like, it's not my own personal desire. It's not my own personal well-being I'm fighting for. And for a long time, I was only focused on myself. So of course I couldn't find my fight in me anywhere. Um, so yeah, that Mars outlet, that's what all of that came from, was that energy has to flow or it will fill your balloon up until it's no longer bearable. And nobody wants that. So I want to talk just a little bit about Taurus and how, like, Taurus in general is often associated with like physical security, aka money or material things. The shadow of Taurus and earth energy in general is materialism and greed and all of that. And I do think that that is definitely part of the shadow, especially, is like missing the point that like money's everything, or that money's going to fill up some kind of void in this middle of you, which is never going to happen. So like definitely that shadow Taurus. But I spent a lot of time like thinking about the highest frequency of Taurus, especially doing the North Node transit that's happening through Taurus right now. Doing that video pulled me deeper into it. I also have a Taurus rising and a Taurus Jupiter, and my business, my spiritual business, has a Taurus midheaven that's at 0 degrees, just like my personal rising sign is. So Taurus is very, very important, apparently. And it does go along with this message of abundance and, like abundance of security, abundance of stability. But it does beg the question. And if you want to go from the low frequency to the high frequency, you got to figure out, like, where does true security really come from? Where does true, like, inner peace and inner stability, like, where does that really come from? Is it something that material things can accomplish or not? Or are the material things, to a certain extent, this is me giving my own hypothesis, you tell me what you think, um, theory, it's like the physical security, aka you have a roof over your head, you have food in your belly, there's no predator chasing you down in this moment, you have physical security. That's not going to give you, like I said, like a deep inner sense of security as far as like how to overcome social anxiety or go to a job interview or sell yourself or whatever the case is there. But it does create kind of fertile soil for you to be comfortable. And like when you can get physically comfortable, which can be achieved with a little bit of like financial stability, then from comfort, it's really interesting. The Taurus, like, you can either basically, like, it's like chutes and ladders. Like, you can get trapped in the comfort and go back to the shadow again, where you're like the fixed earth sign of like trapped in the stability and the repetitiveness and like the predictability. You're like, I like that. I don't want to go rocking my boat. I like knowing where my money comes from. I like, like, I've had this job for 30 years. It's not great, but it's working for me. Like, so that's, again, you're like back to the shadow of Taurus, of like kind of stuck in the material reasons of doing something. But again, if you can reach even higher into like what is true abundance, personally, I think from comfort, the other version is that basically like what this Mercury in Cancer wants you to do is like, can you get comfortable in your physical space such that you can use that as the perfect fertile soil for this Mercury and Cancer process of coming into yourself, into the head of that Cancer well of your emotional truth? And can you be with whatever's in there? Can you leverage your physical security into supporting and stabilizing your emotional exploration? You don't have to just get stuck in a comfort zone. You can use comfort and employ comfort to act as that foundation, that groundedness. That's one of a key step. I have it on a little sticky note here. A key step in emotion management, or shadow work is a subset of emotion management, is to first ground yourself. If you don't know how to ground yourself, you're not ready for shadow work and emotion management. It's like, to go diving into emotional territory, the first thing you need to know how to do is come back out so you don't get lost in there and accidentally drown yourself, like scuba diving metaphor. Like, we want to know how to come back to the oxygen. We want to know how to troubleshoot issues once we get down there before we go messing around on purpose inside our shadow or our emotions or whatever. So coming to it from a place of groundedness and how can I help myself feel stable and secure and comfortable so that I do know that in this moment, my safety is secured. And that lets me have that healthy foundation for doing my inner healing and letting whatever vulnerable feelings might want to express themselves, letting those rise to the surface. Because even if I do feel vulnerable emotionally, I've already done the part where physically I know I'm safe. I know that I actually, in this right now moment, I am safe. So I can take a little bit more of an emotional risk to see what pieces of my shadow might want to come forward. And again, like, I try to reiterate this as much as I can as far as in my little handbook of how I go about life. It's like rule number one on shadow work is only when you're triggered. Like, we don't have to go looking for it. We don't ever have to proactively go there. But I do think that when you have Mercury going through Cancer, it's like all of those emotions, they're just like more in your mind than normal. Like, Mercury is our intellect and our thinking and our decision making and how we take in information, how we express information. So you take Mercury and you dunk it, like put it like right in the head of the well of your emotional truth. So chances are, like, you're gonna be a little bit more aware of what is that emotional truth. Are there friends where every time I see them, I leave with a headache? Like, is this part of, it at that point, it's a physical truth that is trying to get your attention. But again, my personal belief and how I understand it and have pieced it together is like, the first message our self gives us is an emotional one. It gives us a sense of like tension or stress or anxiety or discomfort of some kind, and that basically that those are like rumble strips on the side of the highway, that like if you are frustrated, you're driving your car on the rumble strips, and if you keep going in the direction you're going, the ditch is over there and the terrain and the cliff and all of that is out there beyond the rumble strips. Or you can get frustrated and recognize, hey, I'm on the rumble strips, I'm frustrated, and you can say, great, it's time for my 15-minute break. I'm going to go sit in my car and pull out my little travel journal and write down why I'm so frustrated right now and what am I missing here? Where's the frustration coming from? And rather than just pushing through frustration or some other like mild, quote unquote, like a more mild version of the emotion, you're a little bit annoyed, you're a little bit uncomfortable, you're a little bit tense, you're a little bit frustrated. Like, a lot of times people will push right through that. It's like, nope, my balloon can take it. Just keep filling the balloon more and more and more, which again is fine. You can do that as much as you want, but eventually the balloon could burst. And that practice of what I'm describing, Dolly did here not too long ago, where she was at the store, she was working in the middle of her day, and she was like spiraling in her brain. Like, it was just going haywire with anxiety, and like she wasn't going to get it all done. And she realized, like, then she's annoyed with the customer for interrupting her, which it's like the customer's the whole point. Like, we're trying to sell the groceries. So, it doesn't make any sense to like be upset with the customer just because they're interrupting you and now you're not going to get as much work done. But like we sold the product and that's ultimately what we're here for. And so, anyways, she recognized it right off the bat that like being frustrated with the customer is a bad sign. That's a rumble strip moment of like, this is not productive. This is not constructive. This is heading in a bad direction. And so, yeah, she goes up front and she's like, I'm going outside for a while. You can cover the meat department. And so somebody else goes and covers the meat department. She went and sat in her car and she journaled about where is this level of frustration and anxiety coming from. And she wrote out like all of the things that she wanted to get done today in like the next 2 hours or however long it was at that point. And basically like that was the frustration, was she's like, I'm never going to get all this done. And after she had written it all out, and that's the realization she's having, she's like, somebody told her, who said you have to? Who said you have to get all that done? Okay, so you can't do all of it. What can you do? And then she's like, really? I don't have to do it all? Well, I mean, I guess like I definitely am going to get this one done. And I would have time to do this one too. Okay, so do that. Really? Really? I could do that? Like she had like this whole moment in her car. So she went out there all like got fire rolling off of her. She's all fuming and everything. And she comes back and she's like, what's up, guys? I'm back now. Okay, I'm good. I'm good. All good. Because she went out to her car and she like let all that air come right back out of the balloon and like, don't put it off. You can stop right now. You don't have to push through. And that's the part where Taurus and Cancer both, like I said, they both represent like security and stability. But I think both of them also have it in common where like, if you want inner peace, that's something that you grant to yourself. Like in that moment, like she could have said like, oh no, I have way too much to do. I definitely don't have time to go sit in my car for 15 minutes and manage my emotional energy. Like I don't have time for that. But she, in that moment, it's like, what is your top priority? Is it harmony within the group or is it how you feel? And she has come to the place of like, it's how I feel. I want to feel good. And I don't. This doesn't feel good. I feel like I'm up against the wall. Like I don't have enough time. I'm beating up on myself because I didn't get enough done today. This doesn't feel good. So rather than pushing through and trying to get as much done as I can, I'm going to go see if I can feel better and come back in and have an enjoyable time for the last couple hours that I'm here. And so again, it's like, what is your top priority? And if you're waiting for somebody to give you inner peace or emotional security or like permission to take good care of your emotions, like nobody gives us that. That's something that we sign our own permission slip when it comes to those things. And again, that's where like the practical reasons that we invest in our self-care, even daily self-care, if you have, if you can carve out the time to even just touch base with yourself for 5 minutes, like intentionally turn inward and quietly be with yourself. What's in there? Is it tired? Is it happy? Is it content? Is it excited about the future? Is it marinating about some stupid shit that happened yesterday, some injustice from the past that you haven't worked all the way through yet? What's in there? Just even to see what's in there. What's going on in my emotions? Um yeah. And that like again, I've been in that spot where I thought abundance was money. And I got to a place where the amount of abundance that I could extract from money got to where making more didn't give me any greater sense of abundance. And I was like, this is weird. This like it wasn't supposed to work like that. It was very disillusioning. But now it's like as I've relocated my definition of abundance and reoriented it towards like abundance valuable to me. Money is just paper. It isn't anything. It's like just an opportunity to like connect with a certain experience or to purchase a certain product or whatever. It's an access point. So money isn't anything until you give it meaning. And so I don't want an abundance of money. I want an abundance of valuable things that are valuable to me. And again, that's where I go clear full circle with like, I am so grateful for all of the connection that I've had this week. I am grateful that like, essentially this is my work at this point is connecting with people and helping them in any way that I can, if even only to be there to listen, to give them a little bit of moral support, to cheer them on that they can do what it is that they want themselves to do, and that they can be nice to themselves in the process. Like, it seems like that's a lot of what I do is like cheer other people on, which perfect. My third decan Leo moon absolutely loves to get to do that, to get to, like I was telling somebody yesterday, like I went and visited my brothers the other night, and I hardly said anything the whole time I was there. But when I got there, one of them was like super chatty, and basically all I did was listen and laugh at the funny parts. And I asked a couple questions, and he would just like start going again. And so all I did was listen. All I did was be there and pay attention to what he was saying. But in doing that, like, essentially, I gave him a stage. I shined my spotlight of attention on him and his energy and what he wanted to express and what was fun and what was coming through him in that moment. And like all I did was light it up. But what a gift that is. What a gift that attention can be and how powerful it can be. Like the person I was meeting with the other day, like I was saying something basically just reflecting that you can be nicer to yourself than that, essentially was what I was saying. And she just kind of laughed, and like you could hear the relief, and she's like, "Oh, that makes me feel so much better." I'm like, "See? Ah, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. I want to help people feel better if and when that opportunity presents itself." Cool. But in the meantime, I can take really good care of myself. I can make sure that my vessel is fully maintained. I can make sure that my gas tank is full, that my balloon is empty, whichever analogy works for you. I can plug the holes in my boat, the leaks in my energy. Energy leaks, that's an interesting conversation. It kind of goes back to like friend where every time I would come home, I would have that headache. And then it's like, okay, so where I come home at like, let's say 7 o'clock, it's not like now I have the whole rest of the evening to do something. I need to go lay down and take some headache medication because I'm miserable now. And now I'm back in recovery time. So again, we're back to like, not just, how much energy are you spending in the moment, but the effects of like how you spend that energy that then you have to go home and like do all the recovery work from. um let's see if I have anything on this back page. I think the most, like, just to kind of boil it down into one last thought, I think the most practical thing that you can do, like, quote unquote, do, like, we're human beings, not human doings. But if you really need to, like, quote unquote, do something, rest. That's what you can do. You can rest, you can journal, you can talk to your safe place people, you can get out into nature and slow down to the frequency of the planet. All of these things are practical ways that you can like tap into this energy of what are your needs? How can you take good care of yourself? And so much of it begins by, like, in a very real sense, slowing down so that you can even hear what your emotions, what your body is telling you. Um, so yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it with the notes. I see that you guys have put some stuff in the chat, so I am going to hang out a little while longer um, and chat with you guys. If you have anything else that you want to put in the chat, go ahead and do that. I wish. Let's see. Trying to figure out. Ooh, there we go. I said something at the beginning, and then it had the little emoji screen popped up. It was all small. So scroll back up. Ooh, Billy, yes. Also, it's simply natural as a human being to want to feel good. I think because of trauma, we get confused about what truly feels good to the inner self. So we have to relearn how to care for ourselves. Yes. Yeah. Trauma, conditioning. Conditioning, I think, is, you know, maybe not traumatic in the full connotation of the word, but definitely an influence that pushes you off your own personal center. So conditioning being kind of like a smaller or like a less intense frequency of trauma. So like even if you're not like all out traumatized, like all of us, every single one of us get conditioned when we're born by, the family that we're born into. So, yeah, it is so natural that we feel good. And I think that's why we get so mad when we don't. That's why, we throw fits when we don't, because we know deep down that we should feel good. And especially Mercury in Cancer, Mars in Taurus, I think, like I said, like the volume knob on how good you do feel will be louder. So any discomfort that has been, air that's been stored in the balloon, or like we're bottling things instead of acknowledging that this is going on, any of that is just going to get louder, and that's okay. Like we can allow that energy to flow and transmute it at any time, like even years after the fact. So Billy says too, it's interesting to self-inquire into where that guilt over caring for yourself comes from. I think you've talked about that before with your dad. I Lots of people in my life have kind of like helped me to learn this lesson, and just guilt in general is such an interesting emotion. If you think of like emotions as messengers, or like chronic emotions that you experience a lot as teachers for you, like I've spent a lot of time in guilt. And so I think of guilt as my teacher, that it really does, when we feel guilty, when we feel like so guilty, we feel sick to our stomach, it inspires us to change. It inspires us to move. It inspires something to crack open or be different, because like it literally makes us sick to our stomach to feel guilty. So it's a very productive emotion, actually, in the amount of change and personal evolution that it can inspire. So, no bad emotions. But yeah, it's like for this, it's definitely helpful, I think, to look to your south node, like what's going on with your south node in your natal chart. I know my south node and the aspects it's making, where essentially I'm healing a shadow of like over responsibility. Like I have a tendency to like interpret other people's needs. I don't necessarily ask them. I just assess or can see um like what they're going to need, and then I'm like automatically put it on my own shoulders to like fill this need for them. And that's something that I brought in from my past life experiences, and that's just kind of how I was wired. Was I'm a helper. I'm an overly responsible helper. And that cycle of like needing to help, it led me through burnout cycle after burnout cycle after burnout cycle after burnout cycle after suicide episode after depressive episode after burnout cycle. Like, I mean, it was just over and over and over for like 15 years. And eventually it clicked that self-care, right? Like, you can't just drive the car forever if you never put gas in the tank. So it only makes sense that eventually, like, you will need to stop and take care of yourself. But doing that, you're right, like it steps on a lot of core wounds that I had. For example, like to heal it, to even begin to allow myself to do daily self-care where I spend hours, every single day, I spend hours in my solitude, in my self-care process. And that means that I don't have that energy to give to other people. And I've willingly called that energy back from the other people I used to give it to so that I could give it to myself. And so that's where I'm at right now, engaging in that way. And it's like at the basis of that for me was I thought that I was valuable because I was helping. I had no concept of my value if I was not helping and serving and filling the role, filling the expectations, picking up the slack. Like that I thought was where my satisfaction, where my value, where my like soul level fulfillment was coming from. And to a certain extent, it is like my Virgo South node, my sixth house South node. Being of service does satisfy me in a very sixth house Virgo kind of way, but it's my South node. So, of course, like at some point, it's going to run its course and you're meaning to evolve in a different direction on purpose. And so the answer for me was like going with the flow, accepting that source's love is unconditional. That was like a big piece of that, like deservability piece or worthiness piece of like, no, I know that source energy, God, the universe, whatever, like loves me no matter what. I know that like I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to jump through any hoops to earn that love. The value that I add to other people's lives is a bonus. Like that is not what my life is for. My life is for like floating in the stream of my own energy and going with my own flow. And if that brings me face to face with somebody who's receptive to my particular style of helping, great. I love that shit, but that's not what I'm here for. That's not my driving force. My driving force is going with the flow and like watching where the flow takes me. So getting oriented with your own energy and how it works and what your purpose is, what your why is, where your worthiness comes from, where your value comes from, what are you trying to prove, what are you accepting is true about yourself that may or may not be. There's a lot going on inside of every single one of us that like there are so many different wounds in there that can keep you from believing that you even deserve your own time and attention and love. And so, like, to step into daily self care definitely confronts any issues that you have around your own worthiness or feeling that you deserve less than other people. I need my own space so I can ground. Exactly. Like, to get grounded, I personally believe, like, nature is kind of interesting because, like, technically you have millions of life forms around you if you like walk out in the woods or whatever. So, like, you're not technically alone. But I do think that getting other human beings out of your physical energy space in order for you to ground, meaning like, AKA have solitude on a regular basis and hopefully even like full on physical solitude. Because I don't know, like, I guess human design is probably the closest picture I've seen to this, but the concept is pretty universal when you look at auras. But like human design especially, it has literal pictures where it's like, if you're sitting on this side of the wall and your aura is about 10 feet wide or whatever, is about, double our arm span is how big our aura is, and you're sitting on this side of the wall, and then on the other side of the wall is your roommate, and like their aura is 10 feet wide, like even though you're in separate rooms, like you still are in each other's physical space. So again, it's like if you can like get out of their physical space, like full on solitude, energetic solitude, meaning like there is not another person for as many feet and miles and states and countries as you can possibly put between you and everybody else. It just makes the grounding process go faster. I think the dust can settle faster. And it's so interesting that I'm recommending solitude because, again, back in the day, solitude stepped exactly on my woundedness of when I would be alone by myself, like my self loathing and self hatred and self criticism and, like being in an abusive relationship with myself, basically. When I was alone with myself, that was all I could see was my own self hatred, basically. And when I would be with someone else, like a partner or a friend or whatever, I was seeing myself more through their eyes, which was a lot less hateful, obviously, like way more loving. And so I definitely got dependent to the point where I can only feel decently okay about myself if I'm with someone else. And so when I did start that daily self care journey, like being alone is hard. Like it is okay to admit that like physical time alone is difficult, that like coming face to face with yourself and how you really feel about yourself, like that can be hard sometimes. It was for me. That was definitely one of the barriers where like I just never was alone. So there was never solitude. I was never without somebody else's energy in my physical energy. And so the dust just never really settled. But now, I mean, it's definitely way different than that. let me see this one. Oh, yes, there's ooh, interesting. Irene says, yes, that inner love scares me. Being valuable, being loved makes me scared. Venus square Pluto and Saturn in the chart. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense that you would have fears. And most likely, I mean, with that kind of configuration, especially with Venus in a hard aspect to Pluto, Pluto in evolutionary astrology terms represents, depending on who you look at it, either represents your soul or the wound of your soul. And either way, I mean, basically every soul is wounded. So it's kind of saying the same thing in different words. But so with Venus squaring your Pluto, like basically how you would read that is like in a past life, it didn't go well, right? Like Pluto is the worst stuff that happens to us, like the either like how Stephen Forrest describes it in his book of Pluto, it's like either the tragedies of like human random suffering. Like he has a story in there that's the example of like, I don't know if it was his friend or like his cousin or something like that. Her husband went outside to check on the dogs and was struck by lightning and killed. So like he didn't do anything to her. He didn't mean for that to happen, depending on what your beliefs are around death. But like that wasn't evil. It just was awful. It was a tragedy. And Pluto can include acts of like human depravity. So, like, you know, the Nazi party, Nazi Germany, and how they perpetrated their crimes on millions of people. Like Pluto, like either someone hurt you out of like evil, quote unquote. I don't want to get into a whole thing about that, but like there were really ill intentions behind what they did to you, or there was some kind of tragic loss. Like another example that he gives, it's like, you know, there's two girls, same grade, they're like third graders, let's say, and they both go home from school and both of their moms are crying. And the first girl says, "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" And she says, "Well, daddy left us. He doesn't love us anymore. He loves somebody else. He's going to make a new family now." Heavy, hard, awful, all the things. The second girl, she asks her mommy, "Why are you crying, mommy?" And she says that daddy died in a car accident on his way home and he won't be coming home anymore. That like both of these things represent Pluto type manifestations where at the end of the day, like it really didn't matter. Like, did he die and that's why he abandoned her? Or did he consciously choose to leave his offspring behind and like not take care of her? Either way, like the little girl is equally as abandoned. The reasons might be different, and that may have a certain color on the wound itself, but they're both abandoned. There's a deep, awful wound that was put onto their soul because of another person. Pluto is how I understand that. So basically all of that to say, Irene, that like it is extremely understandable that you would have this fear and that these specific topics of like inner love or like radical deservability or like feeling the divinity of your own soul inside yourself. Like this is truly love, in my opinion, is being able to feel like that you are an extension of this source universal energy, like you are divine love. Um, so it's okay to be scared, and that's again where I come back to this energy is actually really supportive for taking a step forward because we have Mars and Taurus sextiling Mercury and Cancer, that Mars and Taurus groundedness and grounding our physical vessel, taking a little extra sleep, eating a couple extra snacks, maybe getting out in nature just a little bit more, and how all of that allows like the dust to settle in our physical experience. It allows us to feel as safe as we possibly can in our right now experience. And with that like physical groundedness and physical safety, you know, it's okay that you're scared emotionally, but those emotions are, especially if there's nothing physically happening in your right now reality, like a lot of times emotions can be left over because we denied them or we shoved them or like bottled them a long time ago, either earlier in this lifetime or past lifetimes. Like we said, with this kind of configuration in your energy, like most likely there's something past lifetime coming back to be unraveled and sorted through and healed. Um, oh, and especially Venus square Pluto, like what I what I'm sensing is like the phrase, like, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket." Like, this feeling of, like, Venus representing our values, what's valuable to us, how do we find our way back to equilibrium and inner peace and a sense of security and love, and basically, like, especially in olden days and, historic and traditional relationship patterns, it was very common, especially for women, to, like, take all your eggs and put them in his basket, and that's just what you do, Like, "I'm Mrs. John Smith," or whatever the hell. And at that point, you are incredibly vulnerable because you've taken everything valuable to you and given it to the other person. Pluto also has connotations around our power, our personal power, and how we're either owning it or giving it away to others. And it's like that Venus Pluto, like, are they valuable? So you're giving all of your energy to them, or are you valuable? So you deserve to receive some of your own energy, maybe even most of it. um, that's like my favorite thing about self-care is it's like it's really not selfish like some people can believe as they come to it initially. It's like when you pour in your own well, when you like add water into your own cup over and over and over and over again, invest your energy in yourself, turn your magic on yourself kind of thing. Eventually the cup, I mean, you only need what you need. It's like as long as you have what you need, you can feel secure and stable and all of that. So once you put water in there that's like more than what the cup can hold, it all starts overflowing, and that's where it's overflowing onto the people you live with, onto the people you work with, onto the people you see on a regular basis or even on random occasions. That energy, that love that you're investing in yourself, literally pouring it into your own cup, eventually, when your cup is full, it will begin overflowing on everybody around you. And at that point, I feel like that's when you really understand that, like, being loved by other people truly is a matter of loving yourself. Because as soon as you love yourself and as soon as your cup is full, and anytime you go out into the world, you take this full overflowing cup. And so you're giving away love like right, left, and center everywhere you go. You're just like love for everybody. People love a person like that. People love to be around that person. People love to be up close to them and hear what they have to say and share themselves with that person. So it really blew my mind when I got into like the tipping point into self-love of like realizing that when I'm happy and grounded and safe and stable and secure inside of myself and loving myself, and then I go out into the world, I mean, it truly is people being a reflection of how we feel about ourselves. And so, especially where we're talking Venus, Pluto, like that's clearly a healing journey. It's clearly like a deciding where you want to invest your value and where you want to give your power. Do you want to hold on to it to yourself, or do you want to give it to somebody else? That kind of fear, like that, feeling like it makes me scared or whatever, that tells me probably in the past you chose to give it to somebody else. And then there was a sense of betrayal. Either, they die or they do something awful. Either way, you gave them everything and now they're gone and you have nothing. So, like, yeah, the I think the scariest, well, I shouldn't say that because that's just me. Northeast Oklahoma, that's not too far from here. A few hours. Been studying trauma and shame, sitting outside of it and using as cue when to love self, it will show you. Using it as a cue or something. I think I get what you mean. My South Node is in Virgo too. How about that? Aw, no wonder we resonate. My South Node is in Virgo too. I feel like the action of helping is a prayer lived, but I end up short circuiting myself. Irene, have you watched the talk about that last time? I'm probably remembering somebody else, the Gemini North Node, but yeah, there's a Pisces North Node chapter that I mentioned. Maddie's not here today, but she'll put it in the link or in the description later, but you can also find it on the channel under the videos tab. Um, but it talks a lot about that, about like how I think like at one point I paint the picture like your heart as a Virgo South Node, sixth house South Node, like your heart is to be of service. Like you want it so bad. Like you have no egoic desire of any kind other than I want to be helpful. And that can like ruin your whole life. It can leave you stranded by the side of the road, not able to help anybody, not another living soul, including yourself. Um, but it really is true that like the more we go with the flow, the more we pay attention to like, how do I feel? What is my energy telling me? Let me go with my flow. I'm not going to work off a plan. I'm going to let the inspiration come and tell me that it's the right time to do the thing. And if I'm too tired today, then it's not the right time to do the thing. And that's okay. And I don't have to be helpful. I need to be rested so that when the opportunity to help presents itself, I actually have some energy overflowing out of my cup that I'm able to give. Yeah, burnout cycle is like, oh, it's intense. The Pluto and Saturn are in my fourth house. I am always heartbroken all the time. I can imagine, man, Pluto and Saturn, like in the fourth house being like, where and how and when, and like basically that cultivation process of our own inner security. And Saturn is one of the malefics. Pluto is our wound, like I said. So yeah, those are some very intense energies to have there. Again, you can take that, like those both represent, well, Pluto is more of a healing journey. Saturn's more of something you came to build. So actually, it's very cool that you have both of them, because as you heal, you will build a home foundation, basically like a place where you can be comfortable and emotionally secure. Like that'll be for you to build for yourself. Saturn is like if you invest into Saturn, Saturn invests in you. It requires a daily investment of time and energy to cultivate your Saturn placement. And that it will pay off dividends as you invest into that Saturn. And it sounds like in your case, especially, that like those two planets work together, that like as you invest in your Saturn, as you invest in cultivating your own emotional security, like your own safe place in this world, where I understand like love is scary, like, but that's a universal statement. And I wonder, like, is there any love in your whole life that hasn't been scary? Is there any place in your world that does feel safe? And if so, continue, especially over this transit with Mercury and Cancer, continue to allow yourself to come up with ideas and ways and perspectives that can help you to add even more energy into this, cultivating this safe place for yourself. And if it doesn't exist yet, then, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I do see here you're sharing a lot, and you're sharing personal things. And that to me is a sign of feeling at least somewhat safe to be yourself and to show up as you are and express what you got going on. And if that's how you feel about this, you're not wrong. It is a safe place. You're more than welcome to bring these things into this space. And so again, it's like, how can you use these couple of transits, the 6 weeks of Mars and Taurus and the 2 weeks of Mercury and Cancer, to continue to ground and continue to figure out, like, maybe not the entire world is safe. That's maybe a goal that's never even going to happen. But maybe I have one little sliver. Maybe the only safe space I have is Friday at 10 a.m. in the live stream chat, but it's something. It's not nothing, right? Like it's not the whole wide world with no safe space in it. There's at least one little point where you can show up there and feel safe. And once you have that kind of touch base, it's like, okay, now how can I grow that? How can I, Taurus and Cancer both are very fertile energies. They're very like nurturing and birthing energies. And I feel like what's happening, like even over these last few months of like the North Node transiting through Taurus, and Uranus has been in Taurus for like 4 years now. And now we have like all of the personal planets making their way towards Cancer. Like it is like this really slow birth process that feels like we are like almost giving birth to like the next level of our own self, like who we will be when we nurture ourselves at the next level. Like when you pour that much more energy into your own cup, how much more overflow are you going to have to work with? Like I was giving an analogy one time about, man, that overflow, making overflow, it's like a real thing. Like I used to basically like drive around with a quarter of a gas tank. And every once in a while I would flat out like, and I'm speaking energetically, like in a metaphor kind of thing here. Like energetically, I would let my gas tank get almost empty, and then I would fill it up just a little bit, like quarter full, and then I'd let it get almost empty and then fill it up just a little bit. And so I was like barely giving anything to myself. I was just constantly operating at a space of like doing the bare minimum to take care of myself, like eating fast food, not exercising, working 80 hours a week, like just not taking good care of myself. And that was my chronic state, was this little baby quarter of a gas tank. And now I feel like I mostly keep my gas tank full. So like every morning when I do my self-care and I pour the energy into my self-care into my cup, it's like almost instantly all overflow. And so now like my gas tank is full, and like, my trunk of my car, energetically speaking, is full of gas cans that I've like filled up with the overflow of like from my self-care. It has generated so much love and so much energy. I don't need it all. So now I have all these gas cans of all my excess that I can go around and I can like fill up other people's car. I can't, that's not a permanent fix, but it'll get you a few miles down the road. It might like bump you up a little bit to be able to see things a little bit differently, or get on over to this next town where maybe you have a different opportunity to take good care of yourself once you get there. But I can help people and cheer them on a little bit with the excess that I'm collecting. And the other piece of it is like, as you do self-care, I think it gets more and more and more efficient. Like the story with Dolly, where she was in the middle of a shift and felt herself getting frustrated with the customer, frustrated with herself, frustrated with the day. And instead of pushing through, she hollers at them, I'm going outside. Somebody needs to cover the meat department. And like doesn't ask permission, doesn't even check if that's okay. If it's a good time for you, no, it's a good time for me. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to take good care of myself. So yeah, like looking for those opportunities to acknowledge how you feel, and not just like, oh, I should feel different, but like, like she said, like she gets out there and she's like writing in her journal, like, you got to let that out first. And then once that's out, once you see like, yeah, that is ridiculous. Nobody could do that in 2 hours. Like, of course I'm feeling frustrated. I have unrealistic expectations of myself. So like self-care on the spot, emotional awareness, emotional management, like on the spot, like that's radical in today's day and age. Like to stop what you're doing, to stop working and go manage your emotions. Like that's freaking revolutionary at this point. Unfortunately, I'm doing my part to make it more common. So yeah, no, I'm not a therapist. I definitely am not a therapist. That's why I try to like phrase everything in this language of like, this is my experience. This is my own healing journey that I am putting on display to help whoever wants to tune in and get something out of it. Um, yeah, I I've seen a lot of therapists. I've never gone to that kind of school. I did study actually, and I saw the other day how it is so related to Taurus, especially. But like my undergrad and my master's degree are both in agricultural economics, which is basically a microeconomics degree, like applied in the field of agriculture. And the other day, I was watching this thing that said economics is essentially the study of how people interact with things of value. And I'm like, that's Taurus, that's Venus. That's like, I'm a Taurus rising. Venus is my chart ruler. Like, I have a very strict idea of what's valuable to me, especially now that I've spent the last 6 years cultivating it. But yeah, I was like, how interesting that like no, I definitely did not go to school for like psychology or anything like that. I kind of wish I would have. But I took a different path that it really does study the same thing. Like it's just a different way of studying human behavior. And I mean, that's all economics is. That's all like that supply and demand curve is like where do people's demand meet the supply? And that decides the price. That decides the value. How much do people want it? How much of it is there? And that's how valuable it is as they trade it amongst themselves. And like it's just so interesting because basically like that could be a metaphor for how we negotiate life, how we spend our time, how we invest our time into either things that are of value or things that are shiny but they're not of value. Not everything that glitters is gold kind of thing. That's a common Taurus thing of like kind of like my friend who was giving me the headache. Like, yes, I was having a friend, yes, I was getting some connection, but I went home from there and had hours of recovery time to heal my headache every time I would see her. So like, what am I really doing here? Like, is this friendship like, do I just want a friendship or do I want a friendship where I can feel healthy and like I'm thriving in the middle of it, you know? And obviously I decided like I would really like to feel good in my friendships and in my life in general. Mm. Like a soul doctor. Oh, that is so awesome. Oh, that is very cool, Irene. Thank you. Like a soul therapist. I hate to throw that word around just because in today's day and age of disclaimer suits and liability covering your ass and all that, like, dude, people take things and they can run with them out of context, but they can do that even when you are 100% pure in your intentions. Like I tried to give somebody a promotion here not too long ago and they blew up because they felt insulted that like I would offer them this job. How insulting. And I meant it as a promotion. So that like if I was even a little bit on the fence with like, you know, should I take it personally when people misunderstand me? Like, is it my fault? Could I communicate better? Like always, sure, probably, maybe you could learn something. But like also people are gonna hear what they want to hear. Like connecting with other people is freaking hard. Like Matt Kahn, he has a video. I have no idea which one it is at this point, but he's like talking about how um like words are just sounds, like little grunts that we've all agreed mean something. So, like, you know, when you watch two people talking to each other, it's like I am expressing myself and I'm hearing through my own ears, and you're expressing yourself and hearing through your own ears. It's like essentially two entirely different worlds, like coming side by side to like exchange information, um, to give like energy back and forth, but you still only get what you are ready to get. Like this person that I tried to promote, like they were so ready to be insulted that even a promotion felt like an insult. And that is where I think I will come back to this comment that I was started to read earlier at the beginning. I think it fits really good here. And I might wrap it up on there. No, you're good, Irene. No zipping the gem trap. I'm a chatty gal myself. You're all good. Okay, so this is a comment from the I Learned podcast episode that came out on the channel this Wednesday, The Power of Choice, episode 50. That one, I remember I recorded it in August of 2021. And then one of the tarot cards that was in that episode was the same tarot card as I pulled for Friday's live stream last week and the Monday video this week. So, like, super synchronistic. And so like I've thought for a long time, like the timing of that episode and when it reveals itself will be divinely intended. And I'm sure that that has something to do with the people who will be paying attention to those episodes at that time. Like there's clearly something in there that is going to wiggle something inside someone. So great. Looking forward to it. Um, and this person's question, like I totally vibe with the question. And I feel like they are incredibly genuine in how they're asking it. And so that's how I'm going to read it is like, I think it's a very like wholehearted question. So that's how I'm going to read it. That's how I'm going to answer it. Okay. So, one issue I keep going back to with the everything is always working out for me message is how to cope with injustices. Even if I'm not a victim of any sort of injustice, how can I feel completely guilt free? There's guilt again, in accepting that message, knowing that it doesn't seem to apply to all, at least in the physical, perceivable realm, no matter what they do, and that not everyone has the privilege or freedom to make certain choices, namely the choices that would allow them to escape their hardships. And that perhaps the positive things that have happened to me or that I've been able to create in my life are not solely due to my personal choices, but also certain societal privileges, i.e., being able bodied, being born in the US, genetics, etc. This list could get increasingly controversial. I hear you. But I totally understand what you mean. And then the last part, so I understand the power of positive affirmations, though, and certainly don't think it hurts anyone to believe everything is always working out for them and to take action, heal, etc. I just have trouble reconciling it at the end of the day. I know we can only do the best we can with the resources that we have to help those around us, and I suppose that should be enough. Thank you for being the recipient of my journaling session. Anytime. Um, so, this idea of everything is always working out for us, that's an Abraham Hicks idea, and I mentioned it along with a lot of other things in that episode 50 that just came out. And I totally I hear where they're coming from. Like as far as, there are terrible, terrible, like Plutonian things happening in this world. Like every single day, the injustices are numerous every single day. And some people have advantages when they're born that other people don't have. And how do you reconcile that? Like I don't think that these are wrong questions. And I don't mean to be flippant or make light out of like those injustices because I hear you. I can see them too. They are definitely real. And I think it's a good time to kind of like wiggle this a little bit because going into July 5th with Mars moving into Taurus and Mercury moving into Cancer, there's like a shared understanding between these two energies that like things don't just happen overnight. Like if you want to farm or grow food, like there's so much preparation and nurturing of the soil. There's nurturing the plants while they're growing. There's giving them water. There's feeding them. There's dealing with all of those needs over a long span of time. And then you can harvest, like raising a kid, same thing. Like you don't just birth them and now they're there. Like grown up, ready to go. Like it's a long process of meeting the needs of the thing so that it can become what it ultimately wants to become. And I do think that our selves and our self love and our perspective on life and the world and our healing journey, it's a lot like that. Like it doesn't just happen overnight. Like again, I'm going to repeat again. I try not to be annoying with this, but at the same time, I always want to make it clear that I'm not trying to speak to like universal truth. I'm just sharing my perspective in case it's helpful. Um, but there's really like there's a lot of power inside the individual that honestly, truly has nothing to do with the physical world. Like, I personally believe that each and every human, animal, and non human animal, like every single piece of life, tree, whatever it is an extension of source energy. So I personally believe that like we all possess that. And I hear what this person is saying as far as like some of us don't have as easy of a time owning our power and exerting our power in life as others. And then the ones who are better at claiming their power or they have more financial resources that leads them to have a sense of worthiness or whatever they think is going on there. Um, like I personally think it doesn't have anything to do with your physical resources. And again, I kind of go back to my own personal experience of having a savings account that was just like piling up and up and up and up, and like all the extra money that I made that was just extra savings, and like that pile just got bigger. The number on the screen got bigger. Nothing changed in my life. I didn't feel more secure. I didn't feel more abundant. I felt miserable. I felt run down. I was having constant burnout cycles. I was working like 80 hours a week, running on that hamster wheel, trying to like do everything for everyone and be all the things and be so helpful, and like thinking that that's where my value was coming from. And none of that acknowledges that like we have everything inside of us already. Like I think it's so fascinating. Dolly and I basically came to a very similar conclusion. I think this is one of the main reasons we get along so well, is like came to a very similar conclusion that like money does not buy happiness. And, for lack of a better, she has basically been broke slash living paycheck to paycheck like most of her life. And we both still, like, she's gone through a path of like money scarcity, and I've gone through a path of money abundance, and both of us came to the same conclusion, and we agree wholeheartedly that money does not buy you happiness. Money is not, I mean, and I would push it even further a little bit to say like an able body doesn't guarantee happiness. Maybe it makes it easier. Like that part I am absolutely willing to acknowledge. Same as like if you're born into a family where you aren't starving, that like that naturally is an advantage. Like I get that. But at the same time, like to just look at a circumstance on the surface and say that something isn't working out for that person, like, again, I have a very annoying tendency to want to see the silver lining on every single thing. And that includes like really, really dark events that happen in this world, like that are full of suffering. I personally believe that like some of our worst wounds that we go through in this world are like essentially that Chiron wounded healer archetype of like, when you really boil down, like, what is the purpose of your life? Why are you here? And like I shared, like, I'm here to add more love to the planet. I'm here to do my part to transmute suffering into greater light and open space on this planet. And in that case, like, I think my first 30 years of barely keeping my head above water, like marinating in suffering, like gave me a background in it that is extremely helpful. Now, was that things not working out for me? Me attempting suicide multiple times? Was that things not working out for me? Because at this point, I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything, because that is the point of reference that lets me meet with someone or talk to someone who looks me in the face when I say, "How are you today?" And they say, "I'll be real honest, I'm not good. I'm having really dark thoughts. Very, very low, dark, consuming thoughts. And I don't know what to do. I'm stuck." And okay, let's start and let's see where we can go. And I'm not scared of the dark, basically, because of like how much time I spent in it. And was I miserable while I was there? Yeah. Yeah, I was. It was really awful. And do people go through terrible things? Yes, they do. But that doesn't mean that that's like the end of the story. And if anything, like what people do with their limitations, how they respond, how they, like Helen Keller is a perfect example of like being blind and deaf. And she goes on to like be an author and be like a thought leader in our world, like still today. How we respond, I mean, basically what I saw was that you can take any kind of obstacle and you can make it the reason that you can't succeed. That can be something that like even born into a family of wealth or power or privilege or whatever, and then your dad doesn't approve of you, and now you've got the same chip on your shoulder as someone who grew up like paycheck to paycheck, starving in between grocery trips, like same thing, like trying to prove that you're good and valuable and worthy of love. So I personally don't think it matters a whole lot which path you come through. You're gonna suffer no matter what. It just depends on what kind. And that there are some of us who are here to explore realms of Like I look at, if you have heavy Scorpio energy, for example, like there's an intention to be with the darker elements of the human psyche, of like processing grief and loss and betrayal and jealousy and all of the darkest of the dark that humanity has to offer. And like in Brene Brown's TED Talk, um, she says like when you look at your sleeping baby in the crib and you just love it so much and that you instantly start catastrophizing like what could happen to this thing that you love so much, like can you pause right there and lean in to, I'm grateful to feel this because it means I'm alive, it means I love something this much. So even a negative emotion or a negative event on the surface, like everything is an opportunity. Everything in this entire earth physical plane is an opportunity to create and to respond. It's not a matter of the circumstance, it's the response to the circumstance. And, this is something that like I feel like the way Abraham sums it up, and I've definitely used this to help understand myself as far as like Taurus and Cancer, like there's only so much that you can personally do to nurture somebody else. Like I think about myself in a couple of the relationships I had where they they were hell bent on like loving me to a place of loving myself. And all that happened was I pulled them into my depression. And now we're both depressed because you can't love somebody else enough to make them love themselves. Like I said, I'm over here trying to give this person a promotion and they are taking it as an insult because that's where they are. So even at that point, you got to wonder like the physical environment changing around them, is it going to change how they feel? Or are they going to look at the promotion and see an insult? So there's something deeper going on, personally, I believe, than what the physical reality is showing us. Security is way deeper than just your physical resources. Like I said, like security to like overcome things like social anxiety and a lack of connection in your life, or facing your fears to put yourself out there in whatever artistic or dating or whatever form that looks like for you, to have the courage basically to have fear and do it anyway. That's a process that like I think it really doesn't matter what path you come through, like finding courage, unless you have just a shit ton of like Aquarius and Aries energy, like finding courage it'll be a path that you have to work through, like feeling insecure to build the security, like to make that transformation. Like I think we all, to some extent, have a shadow that we're here to transmute. We all have our own unique form of suffering that we are here to try to figure out how to transmute this. It's like, I forget who said this. I think it was Matt Kahn said, like, whatever is part of your unique healing journey, that is your part that you've inherited on behalf of the collective healing journey. Like, we each have our own batch of suffering that we're trying to heal. And to say that just because you have an able body, just because you have money, like suffering automatically stops, like, it's not that I want to minimize or say somebody's suffering is harder. I'm saying that if that's how you think you're going to fix it, you're only going to spin your tires, wasting time thinking that if I just make some money, then I'll feel better. If I can just like get a roof over my head or get some food in my belly, like then I would feel better. Probably in that case, you really would. There's some point of like, what's it called? Like in economics terms, it's called like the point of diminishing returns, where like when you start having something like the first bite of cake, for example, like it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. By the time you've eaten a half a pound of cake, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's enough. Like the last couple bites are not even close to as good as the first few bites. And it's like that. It's like, how can we do things in our own flow, in our own response to what feels good for us? How can we claim our power? How can we believe that we deserve a place in this world that's safe for us to be? There's a lot of internal work, like no matter what your starting point. And I totally get that, like, yes, when you have certain pieces in your childhood that may feel like your starting point is way behind everybody else's. But again, that's kind of like bringing us around to this realization that like we're not here to compare our path with anybody else's anyway. So, I had somebody the other day tell me that, even though I have more experience than you, like I still think maybe you could teach me something. And that was really helpful because it clarified for me my belief that I personally view every single person I ever meet as a teacher for myself. That like, you know, we all have our own experience in getting where we're going. Nobody's path is the same. To say that, you're more healed because you've been working on it for 10 years and I've only been working on it for 2 years, like I don't think it works that way. I think like it's really difficult to quantify like what are you doing that's valuable and what are you doing that's not, because from our human mind, we can try to divine value in terms of physical manifestations like cars and jobs and money and spouses and things like that, versus like according to our soul, according to the universe, according to like our higher self, our inner being, our non-physical energy, like they have a whole different idea of what's valuable and what's happening on this planet. So, you know, I don't think it's possible to like look at something on a surface level as far as like what is the circumstance that somebody is living and determine if everything is working out for them or not. Um, I think it's way deeper than that, because sometimes, like for example, one of the best things that ever happened to me was when I like, long story short, it doesn't really matter. I was ready to be done with something and I just kept doing it. I just kept going and I just kept putting up with it and like doing the thing. And finally, one day I go, my gas tank is pretty empty at this point. And I go in and this thing pisses me off and that thing pisses me off and that thing is sending me into a freaking rage. And now I am just like on fire. I'm so mad. One of the best things that ever happened to me. In that moment, it would have been easy to look at it on the surface and say, like, she's really upset. Like, in this moment, things aren't working out for her. But all of those things for me to notice, like, in a 5-minute span of time was like, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Best thing that ever happened to me. Because in that anger, I finally stood up for myself. I finally put my foot down. I declared my priorities. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. This is what we're going to do instead. I'm no longer doing it. And it wasn't some breakthrough in love and self-compassion that let me do that. It was my own anger at like, I'm so sick of this. And so sometimes like our suffering can push us to the level of like finally being ready to stand up for ourselves and protect ourselves and what actually would be good in our best interest. Hawaii, that's so awesome. I'm glad this is refreshing. That's wonderful. I got to watch your fear versus curiosity with my Sag Gem Nodes axis. Oh, yeah. Like I said, like in that Virgo South Node end of like, I want to help so much. Like like my heart feels like it needs a million hands and a million voices and a million 24 hours of the day. Like just that's how much I want to give. And so a lot of times like the trap can be like, I feel like I'm not doing enough or I'm not putting enough out there or whatever. And that's one of my tapes personally that lets me know that like, hey, I'm headed towards the rumble strips. I'm venturing into a territory where I'm acting in accordance with outside factors and outside forces. I'm letting lots of external things into my internal equation. And when I start to feel like I'm not doing enough, then I recognize like, okay, it's time to recenter. It's time to get everything else out of my equation, let the dust settle, let my energy clear, and take a nap, take a shower, go for a walk, whatever it is that you do to ground yourself. Those are probably my main three. The nap is the main one. Like, I don't know if you guys listen to Abraham Hicks, but she has this analogy of the high flying disc that like when you wake up in the morning, like that's your best shot at getting on the high flying disc, which means like to claim a high vibration, like claim an appreciative mindset and outlook at the very beginning of your day. basically you have a better chance of like staying on the high flying disc throughout the day versus if you just wake up and move right into your day, then like the high flying disc has kind of sailed and now you're like down here in the fray, like getting beat to hell by everybody else's vibrations. um I don't know where I was going with that. She has another saying. Oh, the high flying disc. So yeah, like she she teaches that like when you wake up in the morning, there it is. But I've also found that like I can take a nap, like an afternoon nap, especially if I don't set my alarm, if I just let myself go to sleep and I'll sleep as long as I want. And when I wake up, I'm on the high flying disc again. Like you can do it all over again. So napping can be incredibly grounding. Um, Anything that breaks the connection with the energy that you currently are trying to ground through or from or whatever that case is. So yeah, this is a great 6 weeks. Like that Mars through Taurus energy is a great time to really deliberately focus on what do I do? What are my go-to grounding moves when I have intense energy going on inside me? How do I ground myself? And to get really familiar and then probably whip tools out on occasion as we move through, especially Mercury and Cancer. But the next one after Mercury in Cancer is Mercury in Leo. And that's where it gets even more fun because I think like we talked about Mars and Taurus helping us to feel grounded so that we could have like a stable foundation to like do our Cancer inner emotional exploration thing. It's like when we get into Mercury in Leo, that same groundedness is going to support us in feeling confident and secure to express ourselves, like maybe in new ways that we never have because of the deep diving that we've done while Mercury was in Cancer, because of the inner truth that we explored within our own emotions while Mercury's in Cancer. A lot of inspiration comes through your emotions. Like that's where I get my creativity, is like my passion, the things that come through me that like I can't not do that. And so that's an emotional process. So the more we're in our emotions and taking good care of them, when we get to Mercury in Leo and the sun in Leo and like the new moon in Leo that's coming, the full moon in Aquarius that's coming, like all of that is going to be like new levels of self-expression. But that doesn't just magically happen. Like that is a factor. It's an output of how well we take care of ourselves. Like in these next 2 to 6 weeks, it will be like directly proportionate to how bold we feel like being, how secure we feel we are when it comes to expressing ourselves out into the world. Ooh, yes, the naps are very helpful to reset. So that's my go-to move, is an afternoon nap. Usually by like 1 or 2 o'clock, I'm like, okay, ready for my nap. And that's anywhere from like an hour on the shortest side to sometimes you go to bed at like 2 o'clock and you wake up the next morning. Sometimes you're really sleepy and you just need some rest. So yeah, so I think that's good for this day. I love this ongoing conversation that is on my channel. And while I don't think I can ever, that's the Abraham saying I was going to share, was you can't get sick enough to help a sick person get well. You can't get poor enough to help a poor person become prosperous. Like really her point there is like, the best thing you can do for anybody else's thriving is to be thriving in your own life. And that may sound selfish. Like when they say put your oxygen mask on before you help other people, it may sound selfish to you, and that's okay. That's where you're coming to the process from. But like it also is true that like when your vibration is high and you are so solid in your high vibration that now you are the dominant force and you are influencing people to rise in their own right, that is a true service to humanity. Like lowering yourself down into other people's suffering can only help them so much. And risks, like they teach lifeguards, like when people are drowning, like you have to be really careful about saving them because there's a good chance that if you're not strong enough or if the waves are overpowering you or whatever, that like you're trying to save this person and they can drown you both. And like as much as it would be absolutely traumatic to like be a lifeguard and choose to not save somebody, like at a certain point, sometimes it boils down to a choice between Do you want to try to save them and you're basically risking your own health and well-being and vitality? Or do you need to prioritize your own well-being in this moment so that you even have a chance to see tomorrow and potentially help somebody tomorrow or over the course of the long term? So I definitely get I mean, it's a very common piece of feedback that like self-care is selfish, and maybe maybe it's in your self-interest, but I would argue, like, so is eating food, so is drinking water, so is getting any sleep at all. Like, these are all things that we need to do for ourselves for survival, and whether or not each individual wants to include emotion management as part of their survival needs is really up to the individual. I personally have lumped my emotion management into my survival practices. Like, this is the top of my list. Like, if my energy's not right, then I don't go. I cancel on the person, I disappoint them. Like, that disappointing them is better than snapping at them, biting their head off, ripping them apart for some kind of like they're the straw that broke the camel's back kind of moment. I've had enough of those in my life, enough of those little like outbursts that, yeah, I'd rather not do that. I would rather disappoint you in the moment than hurt you with my low energy. So, again, these are just my own thoughts. I am not a trained therapist. I just am somebody who wants to feel good in their life. And I make it a priority to invest my time to try to do that for myself. And every day is a little different. And year after year, it gets a little bit easier. It's a skill set that we can practice and build like anything else. So I personally love like having this space to share these stories, to share this perspective. Even if only ever one person got something out of it, I would still think that that's a cherry on top of the sundae of like just the joy that I personally get from being able to share these philosophies in a space where it feels like there's even the potential for it to resonate with someone else and to attract more of my soul community to me. So thank you so much for being here. Like I always say, I hope you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I. Okay, bye.